They thought they had seen it all. The Japanese aces, men who had fought through the skies of China, Burma, and the Pacific, believed no enemy could truly terrify them. They had outflown British Spitfires, dueled with American Mustangs, and even hurled themselves at the lumbering flying fortresses. Nothing in the sky seemed beyond their reach. But then came a shadow that changed everything. At first, they laughed at the American B-29 Superfortress, a bomber so massive, so slow, so impossibly high above the clouds. It seemed almost like a target sent from heaven, yet within months, their laughter turned into silence. For this was not just another bomber, this was a machine that rewrote the rules of war. A machine that burned cities to ash and carried the atomic fire that ended an empire. Stay with us, because this is not just another story. This is the hidden truth of World War II they never wanted you to know. From the summer of 1944, the skies above Japan became the stage for a battle no pilot could win. The B-29 flew higher than the reach of Zero fighters, in thin air where Japanese engines wheezed and froze. It carried remote-controlled turrets with a dozen heavy guns, each one guided by computing sights that turned the sky into a wall of fire. To the aces of Japan, men once proud of their sword-like skill, it was like fighting against a mountain of steel. And as the raids grew in size and the firestorms began to consume Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya, these hunters of the sky discovered a crushing truth. They were no longer the predators. They had become the prey. In the early years of the war, Japanese fighter aces carried themselves with an aura of invincibility. They were the hunters of the sky, men who had sharpened their skills over the battlefields of China and Burma, at Pearl Harbor, and across the wide Pacific. They flew the nimble Zero, a machine that could turn tighter, climb faster, and outmaneuver almost any opponent in .10, the world. In those years, each mission seemed like a duel of skill, a test of nerve, where courage and agility meant everything. These men were not just pilots. They were warriors in the air, knights with wings, and they knew it. When the British sent Spitfires, the Japanese matched them. When the Americans brought Mustangs, the Zero still held its edge in the hands of a master. Even the mighty flying fortress, the B-17, and the rugged B-24 Liberator had fallen under their guns. Yes, losses were taken, but the aces believed no bomber was beyond their reach. With enough bravery and determination, even the largest machine could be broken apart by fire and steel. That belief was a foundation of their pride. But in the summer of 1944, the sky itself seemed to change. From the horizon came a new shape, massive, gleaming silver in the sunday. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress. At first, Japanese squadrons dismissed it with scorn. A bomber so enormous, with wings that seemed to stretch forever, flying higher than any fighter could comfortably reach. To many, it looked clumsy, slow, and obvious. A gift, some said. An easy kill. Yet within weeks, that confidence began to wither. The B-29 was not just another bomber. It was an entirely new breed of machine, built with technology that Japan could not match. Its wings spanned 141 feet, longer than the width of a city street. Its fuselage stretched nearly 100 feet, dwarfing the nimble Japanese fighters that circled below. It cruised at altitudes above 30,000 feet, where the air grew thin, where engines starved for oxygen, and where human lungs gasped even through crude oxygen masks. For Japanese pilots in Zeros or Ki-43 Oscars, climbing that high was like chasing the edge of space. Controls stiffened, engines sputtered, frost coated the canopy. By the time they reached the Silver Giants, they were already half defeated, their strength sapped by nature itself. Inside the B-29, the story was different. The American crews sat in pressurized cabins, breathing normally, talking calmly through intercoms, almost as if they were on another planet. They fought in comfort, while their opponents struggled simply to survive the climb. This small piece of engineering, invisible to those outside, tilted the entire balance of the war. And then there was the firepower. Earlier, bombers had their blind spots, their vulnerable approaches. Japanese aces had grown skilled at finding those weaknesses, diving from above or slashing from the side. But the B-29 bristled with remote-controlled turrets, each guided by computing gun sights that could track a target with cold precision. 12 heavy .50 caliber machine guns formed a wall of lead that tore apart anyone daring to come close. To the Japanese, it felt less like fighting men and more like facing a machine that saw everything and struck without mercy. The first true test came in June of 1944, when the B-29 struck at the Yawata steel works. The physical damage to the plant was small, but the psychological effect was enormous. For the first time in the war, Japanese soil was under direct attack by a machine no defense could stop. Fighter squadrons scrambled. They climbed with all their strength, but few even reached firing position. Those who did returned shaken, some trailing smoke, others with their wings shredded by turret fire. Not a single B-29 was lost that day. The men of Japan's air defense whispered about it afterward. Some called it hopeless. Others compared it to shooting arrows at a mountain. The image spread quickly. The B-29 was more than a target. It was an untouchable shadow, a machine that mocked their courage. From that day, a change settled over the pilots' briefings. No longer were they hunters eager for the chase. They looked up with dread, knowing that each silver wing in the sky carried not only bombs, but the weight of America's industrial might. By the end of 1944, the Japanese High Command could no longer ignore the truth. The B-29 was not prey. It was the hunter. Each raid against the Japanese mainland revealed the same brutal pattern. Their best aces, men with dozens of kills, men who had once ruled the skies over Asia, were being cut down by machines they could scarcely touch. Squadrons scrambled as the silver wings appeared over the horizon. Pilots climbed until their engines sputtered and their fingers froze on the controls. Yet when they reached the bombers, they were met not with opportunity, but with death. The remote turrets locked onto them with mechanical calm. Streams of tracer fire tore across the sky. Many never fired a single shot before being shredded and sent plunging into the sea or countryside below. Even those who survived the climb often returned with aircraft so battered they could barely land. For the aces of Japan, this was a humiliation deeper than wounds. They had once measured their worth in duels, in skill and courage. Now, all that training seemed worthless. Against the B-29, their tactics turned to ashes. Desperation grew. Commanders began to order ramming attacks, known as Tayatari. Pilots were told to hurl themselves into the wings or tails of the bombers, to sacrifice their lives in exchange for the faint chance of breaking a formation. Some volunteered, convinced there was no other way. Others went unwillingly, pressured by superiors who saw no alternative. A few strapped explosives to their planes, turning themselves into human missiles. In the chaos of these attacks, some superfortresses were brought down. But for each bomber lost, several Japanese pilots perished, their skill and experience extinguished in fireballs across the sky. The psychological toll was immense. Men who had once laughed at American machines now whispered in dread before takeoff. Young recruits, poorly trained and rushed into combat, stood little chance. Many never even reached the bombers before being cut down. Veterans looked on with hollow eyes, powerless to save them. One ace later admitted, "We were not pilots anymore, we were sacrifices." And then came the night that turned dread into despair. On March 9, 1945, 334 B-29s lifted from the Mariana Islands, but they did not carry high explosives aimed at steel or factories. They carried fire. Tons of incendiaries designed to ignite the wooden heart of Tokyo. The bombers came in streams, low enough to evade the jet stream, high enough to remain beyond most defenses. Japanese interceptors scrambled into the night, but they were lost before the battle truly began. Radar stations faltered. Pilots searched for shapes against the glow of the city below. When they did find the silver giants, they were cut apart by turret fire, their wreckage raining into the inferno below. Tokyo burned. The incendiaries created a firestorm so fierce that winds howled through the streets, dragging people into the flames. Entire districts vanished in hours. Families suffocated as oxygen was consumed, others were incinerated where they stood. 100,000 souls perished that night, more than in either atomic bombing to come. The city, the proud heart of Japan, became a sea of ashes. For the pilots who lived through it, the memory was unbearable. They had launched to protect their nation, their emperor, their families, but they returned powerless, watching the glow of their burning homeland from above. One ace whispered later, "We could not protect our families, we could not protect our emperor, we were fighting ghosts." After Tokyo, the raids only grew. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, one after another, burned under the wings of the Superfortress. With each mission, the truth carved deeper into Japan's defenders. The B-29 was not only a weapon of war, it was a force of nature, a storm of steel and fire that no courage could stop. By the spring of 1945, Japan's skies were no longer fields of glory. They were killing grounds, where the proud hunters of the past had become the hunted. And for the aces who had once laughed at the silver bombers, every mission became a flight into despair. By the spring of 1945, Japan's cities had become targets in an unrelenting storm. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, each burned under the wings of the B-29. The firebombing campaign erased centuries of wooden neighborhoods, leaving only ash and silence where life had once flourished. From above, the Japanese aces saw the glow of their nation's destruction and realized that nothing they did in the air could alter the fate below. Every sortie ended the same way. Formations of bombers pressing on, cities reduced to ruins, and defenders returning broken, if they returned at all. And then came the morning of August 6, 1945. From Tinian Island, a single B-29 lifted into the air. Its name was Enola Gay. Unlike the others, it carried only one bomb. Little boy. At 8:15, the weapon detonated over Hiroshima. In a flash brighter than the sun, tens of thousands were gone. Buildings vanished. Shadows of human beings burned into walls, rivers filled with the dead and the wounded. Within months, more than 140,000 souls would perish from blast, fire, and radiation. For Japanese pilots, the news was incomprehensible. A single bomber, a single weapon, had done what entire fleets could not. There was no intercepting it, no duel, no act of courage that could alter its course. 3 days later, another B-29 boxcar carried Fat Man to Nagasaki. Again, the sky split open. Again, a city was erased. 70,000 lives extinguished in seconds. To the aces who had spent years honing their skills, who had once measured their honor in aerial victories, this was the final humiliation. They had trained to fight men, but now they faced gods of destruction, machines that ended battles before they began. When Emperor Hirohito surrendered in mid-August, many pilots felt not relief but emptiness. Their purpose dissolved. They had fought for years to defend their skies, yet in the end they had never truly stood a chance. Against the B-29, skill, sacrifice, and bravery had all been rendered meaningless. The war had become not a contest of courage, but a demonstration of industry and technology. The aftermath was crueler still. Survivors carried the weight of failure for decades. Veterans who had survived duels with Spitfires and Mustangs now admitted that the Superfortress had broken their will. Some could not speak of those days without trembling. Others confessed that the sound of heavy aircraft in peacetime froze their blood, as if the ghosts of 1945 still circled above. The B-29 had not only destroyed cities, it had destroyed the spirit of Japan's defenders. For many, the memories were worse than wounds. They recalled watching young recruits hurled into cockpits with only hours of training, told to climb into thin skies and meet an enemy they could never defeat. They remembered seeing those boys fall in flames before reaching the formation. The guilt lingered long after the war ended. "We were not pilots anymore," one ace whispered years later. "We were sacrifices." Even as decades passed, the shadow of the Superfortress never left them. Some turned bitter, blaming their leaders for sending them into a war Japan could never win. Others turned inward, haunted by nightmares of silver wings blotting out the sun, or of cities burning in the night. their war never truly ended. It lived on in their minds, in the silence of sleepless nights, in the memories they carried to their graves. The B-29 was more than a bomber. It was the symbol of an age that had overtaken them, a glimpse into the future of warfare. It proved that courage alone could not stop machines, and that fire from the sky could shatter even the proudest spirit. By the war's end, the hunters of the early years had become the hunted, and the ghost that haunted them most was the shadow of the B-29. By the time the war ended, the B-29 had done more than destroy cities. It had broken the spirit of those sworn to defend them. Japanese aces, once hailed as knights of the sky, finished the war in silence, haunted by memories of silver wings and burning cities. They had faced many enemies, but none had crushed them as completely as the Superfortress. It was not simply a machine of steel and fire. It was the shadow of inevitability, the sign that courage and sacrifice could not stop the march of technology. This story is not just about bombers and dogfights. It is about human beings forced to confront the limits of their own strength. It is about young men sent to die against an enemy they could not hope to defeat. It is about the lesson that in World War II, bravery alone was not enough. The B-29 showed the world that wars could be won, not only with pilots and soldiers, but with factories, machines, and a relentless industrial will. And yet, beyond the destruction, there is a deeper truth. The war ended, but the scars remained. Survivors carried their nightmares long after the surrender. Some lived with guilt, others with bitterness, and many with silence. In their eyes, we see the cost of a conflict that consumed millions. And in their memories, we glimpse the price of a world that lost itself to fire. When we speak of World War II today, we must remember not only the victories, but also the suffering on every side. The silver wings that once cast shadows over Japan remind us of the danger when war becomes inevitable and when human lives are sacrificed to machines. If there is any lesson to carry forward, it is that peace is more powerful than pride, that justice must outweigh vengeance, and that freedom must never again be built on ashes. The legacy of the B-29 is not only one of destruction, but also of warning. For if history teaches us anything, it is this: the true strength of a nation lies not in the weapons it wields, but in the humanity it preserves. Let us honor the memory of all who fell in World War II by ensuring that the skies of our future carry only hope, not fire. The shadow of the B-29 still lingers in the memories of those who lived through it. For the Japanese aces, it was a nightmare they could never escape. For the American crews, it was a symbol of their nation's industrial power. And for the civilians below, it was the face of unimaginable terror. World War II was not only fought with courage in the skies, but also with machines that reshaped the meaning of war itself. Yet even in its devastation, there lies a warning for us today. Technology without restraint can destroy not only cities, but the very spirit of humanity. The firebombing of Tokyo, the atomic shadows of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, remind us that the true cost of war is not measured in victories or defeats, but in lives lost and futures stolen. As we look back, we must also look forward. The lesson of World War II is not only that industry can win wars, but that peace must be stronger than pride. Courage must be found not in combat, but in compassion. And freedom must be defended not with fire from the sky, but with the voices and actions of people who refuse to repeat the past. So if this story moved you, do not let it fade away. Share it, speak it, pass it on, because history only lives when we remember it. And by remembering, we honor not only those who fought, but those who never returned. Together, we keep their memory alive and ensure that the skies of our future carry only hope, not war.